Ferrari is heading into the Melbourne Grand Prix with more question marks hanging over their heads than a detective in a bad crime novel. Their star-studded driver lineup, the most hyped duo on the grid, might find the fight for victory a bit more uphill than they'd prefer. Think Sisyphus pushing that damn boulder, but in a scarlet racing suit. Pre-season testing threw a few wrenches into the works, revealing some pesky gremlins lurking within the SF-25. And while the alarms in Maranello haven't quite reached abandoned ship levels yet, the early signs suggest that this season could go belly-up way sooner than anyone in red would like. So, can Leclerc and Hamilton do something, anything, to prevent another face-bomb-worthy performance? And more importantly, does Ferrari's new car concept actually hold the key to turning things around? Or is this just another overhyped Italian tragedy waiting to unfold? Let's be real. Ferrari has been the most talked about team heading into 2025. We're talking about the squad that pulled off the transfer of the century, landing a 7-time world champion to partner one of the sharpest young talents in the game. On paper, this is a pairing that should send shivers down the spines of their rivals. Give these two a properly sorted car, and they'll carve through the grid like a hot knife through butter. I mean, Leclerc has pulled off some wizard-level qualifying performances in the past, even when his car had no damn business being on the front row. But here's the kicker. The SF-25 isn't expected to be the fastest car this year. No, the real excitement comes from the fact that it'll be driven by two hyper-competitive maniacs who refuse to settle for mediocrity. Ferrari opted for a concept shakeup in hopes of squeezing every last drop of performance from the current regulations before the big 2026 reset. It all sounded good on paper, and the simulator data painted a pretty picture. But, and here's where things get dicey, what looked promising in theory didn't exactly translate to the real world. 3 days of pre-season testing in Bahrain showed that Ferrari still has more issues than a soap opera. Sure, if you're gonna have problems, better to spot them now rather than mid-season, but let's be honest, it's never a great look to enter the first race of the year already playing defense. If the Bahrain test data is anything to go by, Ferrari could struggle to even hold on to second place in the Constructors' Championship. Red Bull and Mercedes have flexed their muscles, and both have serious firepower in their lineups. Meanwhile, McLaren, with their freakishly well-balanced car, seems poised to be the team to beat in Melbourne. And then there's the Ferrari-specific nightmare fuel, tire degradation. Day 3 of testing was particularly rough, with Hamilton unable to complete a full race simulation thanks to the Pirellis melting away faster than an ice cream cone in the Australian sun. If Ferrari doesn't get their long-run pace and tire management sorted out, Melbourne could turn into a very painful wake-up call for the team that was supposed to be the blockbuster act of 2025. So, will Ferrari prove the skeptics wrong, or are we in for another season of heartbreak, dramatic team radio messages, and overly enthusiastic Italian hand gestures? Buckle up. This one's gonna be a ride. There's something seriously different about the track we're heading to this week compared to the absolute chaos we left behind in Bahrain. Track limitations. See, Bahrain is a circuit that really punishes the rear end of the car. Something that, let's be honest, the SF-25 seems to handle about as well as a fish trying to ride a bicycle. It's a known weak spot in Ferrari's latest brainchild. But Melbourne is a whole different beast, where the front-end limitations take center stage. And here's where things get spicy. Ferrari's 2025 Challenger, armed with its brand new pull rod front suspension, was designed specifically to be more stable in these kinds of conditions. Now, before anyone gets too excited, let's pump the brakes, literally and figuratively. While this should make the car more aggressive in braking zones, meaning Leclerc and Hamilton can brake later, get back on the throttle earlier, and not have to wrestle a car that suddenly decides to yeet itself into a spin, there's a small catch. They haven't actually tested this properly yet. Yeah, you heard that right. The first real test of whether Ferrari's mad scientist concept actually works will be in Melbourne. And guess what? A couple of hours of practice sessions might not be enough to figure out if they've hit the jackpot or just signed themselves up for another season of frustration and regret. But hey, Ferrari will learn from Australia, one way or another. That much is certain. Now, according to sources deep inside Maranello, or, the usual paddock gossip, the team is actually pretty satisfied with the work they put in during Bahrain testing. That being said, they're very aware that the results they got weren't exactly inspiring and that the car still has some gremlins that could haunt them throughout the season. Leclerc himself has already sounded the alarm, warning that just because they look like the most dangerous driver duo on paper doesn't mean Ferrari can just waltz into 2025 expecting to dominate both championships. The guy from Monaco, who probably dreams about finally getting a title shot without some sort of tragic plot twist, was crystal clear. the SF-25 still needs a ton of work. And here's the real headache Ferrari is facing. They've got a huge fork in the road coming up. They need to decide, and fast, whether it's actually worth continuing to invest resources into fixing up this 2025 car, or if they should just cut their losses and go all in on developing their 2026 Challenger, given that those new regulations will be finalized early in the season. Now, the Bahrain headaches they're dealing with aren't your typical, "oh no, we just need to tweak some aero bits," kind of problem. No. The core issue. The car's operating window. The extremely finicky range where the car actually performs at its peak. And this is where things get really interesting, because we've seen how quickly things can go south when a car doesn't behave the way the team expects. Case in point, Red Bull's brief performance drop when their upgrades didn't align with the car's behavior. This is a very common issue with this generation of F1 cars, and it's kind of like a magic trick. Get everything in the perfect operating window, and bam, suddenly you've unlocked a whole extra second of performance out of nowhere. But, and here's the kicker, that magic window is ridiculously fragile. A couple of degrees hotter track temperature? Boom. Car goes from flying to struggling. A slight shift in wind direction? Say goodbye to your perfect balance. And let's not even start on tire degradation, because if Ferrari doesn't get a handle on that, Melbourne could turn into another tire management nightmare. So yeah, Leclerc and Hamilton aren't just fighting their rivals on track, they're also fighting the car itself. And if Ferrari doesn't crack this operating window problem fast, this dream team pairing could end up spending most of the season swearing at the radio instead of fighting for wins. Buckle up, because this season is about to get messy. When it comes to the expectations for 2025, Leclerc didn't exactly march into battle waving a victory flag. He sent out a cautious warning, a little reality check for those already dreaming of Ferrari's glorious return to dominance. He pointed out that testing is mostly about focusing on your own damn car rather than obsessing over what the other teams are doing. Sure, during a race weekend, you're obviously going to keep an eye on your rivals. But right now? He made it clear that they have zero clue about McLaren's fuel loads, run plans, or whether they were even pushing at full capacity. So yeah, the data is more of a sneak peek rather than a definitive verdict. That being said, Leclerc did acknowledge that this was a crucial test session, not just to gauge Ferrari's weaknesses against McLaren, but also to compare his own feeling in the car versus what the data says. And while Ferrari's preseason hasn't exactly been sunshine and rainbows, there's an undeniable wave of optimism spreading through Maranello, mostly fueled by Frederic Vasseur. The guy is exuding unshakable confidence, convinced that the SF-25 is packing a seriously strong package heading into 2025. Now, here's where things get spicy. Vasseur didn't hold back when discussing Ferrari's big shift in car philosophy. He firmly believes that the concept change is not just necessary, but a game changer, bringing way more performance than anyone could have predicted. He went even deeper, explaining that by overhauling the suspension system, Ferrari unlocked a whole new dimension in their development potential. After a few years of same old, something had to give, and according to Fred, they've finally broken through that stagnation. Now, let's pump the brakes for a second. Are they actually in the fight for victory in Melbourne? Well, don't get your hopes up just yet. Vasseur admitted that it's way too early to call, especially considering that Bahrain's testing conditions were absolutely bonkers. So extreme that even the smartest engineers in the paddock are struggling to get a clear picture of where each team stands. Track temperatures, wind conditions, fuel loads, hell, even the time of day, made massive differences from one session to the next. Ferrari, and everyone else really, is still flying half-blind, trying to piece together what's real and what's just testing noise. And then we get to the Hamilton factor. There's been a ton of wild speculation about how he's adapting to Ferrari, with some so-called experts claiming that the SF-25's updates aren't nearly as groundbreaking as the seven-time champ had hoped, especially after his miserable last few years at Mercedes. So, is Lewis about to trade one disappointment for another, or is he gearing up for a comeback story that'll leave everyone speechless? Well, we won't have to wait long to find out. In less than a week, Hamilton gets his first real chance to prove that he's not just here to collect podiums, he's here to fucking win. And that's a pretty damn exciting thought for Ferrari fans. The good news? Hamilton himself is feeling good about the car, which is a lot more than we can say for some other drivers on the grid, cough signs cough. So, Ferrari might not be rolling into Melbourne as the outright favorites, but the vibe inside the team is clear. This isn't just another false dawn. They believe they've got the foundation for something big. Whether or not it actually delivers, though, that's another story entirely. The British driver, ever the diplomat, kept things measured but optimistic, saying, "Look, it's still a bit early to make big declarations, but I'm really enjoying the car. We're starting to click, slowly but surely. Right now, we're just testing a ton of different things, so I'm not really tweaking the setup to suit me yet or steering the car in the exact direction I want. We're just going through the motions, collecting data, figuring things out." Pre-season testing, for me, was more about learning how to communicate with my engineers, getting a feel for how we work together. There's still a lot to explore, and with every lap, I feel like I'm unlocking a little more potential. Now, let's get real here. If this Ferrari Dream Team ends up with a properly competitive car, you can bet your ass that the Hamilton versus Leclerc battle will be one of the hottest stories of the season. These two aren't exactly going to be holding hands and skipping through the paddock together. The big question is, can Ferrari keep them from tearing each other's heads off? We all saw last year just how much driver performance can influence a team's success. That means Ferrari doesn't necessarily have to outpace McLaren in raw speed to be contenders for both championships. They just need a strong, consistent, and reliable car that actually listens when the drivers tell it what the fuck to do. No more of that, "Oh, we swear it works in the simulator" nonsense. That said, the SF-25 isn't exactly rolling into Melbourne without baggage. The early signs suggest that it's going to have some teething issues, and whether we like it or not, its operating window, aka that sweet spot where everything clicks, is looking a little high maintenance. This car might need more babysitting than a hyperactive toddler, which means both Leclerc and Hamilton could find themselves fighting the machine as much as they fight their rivals. How are they going to handle this challenge? That's the million-dollar question. But if there's any duo on the grid that has the talent, experience, and sheer stubbornness to drag a difficult car into title contention, it's these two. Now, with all of this in mind, what do you think about the early limitations of the SF-25? More importantly, do you think they'll be serious enough to keep Hamilton and Leclerc out of the championship fight? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to dive deeper into Vasseur's latest desperate attempt to silence the doubters, make sure to click on the video that's popping up on your screen right now. You won't want to miss it.